Prime Minister Mark Carney was greeted warmly at the White House today by President Donald Trump as he arrived to discuss tariffs and trade. Unlike the hostile reception accorded former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Trump seems to like Carney and, perhaps more importantly, doesn't appear to be threatened by him. I spoke with political scientist Terry Givens, a professor at the University of British Columbia, about what this might mean for the future of the relationship between Canada and the United States. So, Terry, Prime Minister Mark Carney goes to the White House today to talk to President Donald Trump about trade and tariffs. And he really gets a warm welcome. I mean, Trump talks about how much he respects him and he likes him. And that is such a contrast to how Trump treated former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. There seemed to be like political or personal animosity between the two. Am I reading that right? Or would you agree with that? And if you do, to what extent is animosity between leaders is it common at the international level?
So I agree with you. I do think that Trump has kind of personal vendetta against Justin Trudeau, and there's lots of speculation about that. But I do think it has to do with the fact that Justin Trudeau was very popular and, good looking, younger guy. And I think that does threaten Trump when he's around somebody who is, maybe a little more popular than he is, et cetera. So, I think there's a lot of personal angst for Trump when he's around people who he thinks are better received than he is. And I think he probably feels a little more affinity with Carney. He's not, Carney's not old. I mean, I'm practically the same. I'm a little older than Carney, actually. So I don't think he's old, but he's a different kind of leader than Trudeau was. He's well respected at the international level. And I think Trump responds to people who he thinks are more kind of equal to him in many ways. I mean, because the funny thing is with Trudeau, it was just all about that Trudeau was, a good looking guy who was very popular. And I think he just sees Carney as somebody who, um, you know, first of all, he doesn't know him that well. He hasn't been around him much and he's it just doesn't have the same sense of kind of with you see what happens with Macron, right? So Trump and Macron are like grabbing each other's hands when they're shaking hands, and it's this macho thing. So I do think there's that kind of macho I'm better than you sensibility when Trump is around kind of younger international leaders.
So here we are. I don't know how many billions of dollars of damage have been done to the respective economies because of Trump's tariffs, and this looks like sounds like junior high. You know, is this, have we seen this play out before in the past with other leaders? Are we seeing it play out in other parts of the world like this? Like maybe with Europe's response to Putin?
No, I mean, you can't say the word unprecedented enough, right? I mean, this is chaos. It literally, I mean, I'm listening to the reports about Carney's meeting and I'm just like, but there's so much uncertainty. And that is the thing that we have not seen, for a long time. I mean, probably going back to when, there was upheaval in Asia, or Latin America. Um, but it's the US. So the difference is that it's the world's superpower in chaos and literally giving away a lot of its prestige and financial capacity. I mean, I don't know that we've ever seen anything like this. I mean, some folks have been trying to make comparisons to the transition from the Soviet Union to what is now Russia and independent states, but it's even so it's nothing like anything we have seen before. I mean, because you have the United States, where I am a citizen, giving up its capacity to dominate.
You are down in California right now as we speak, and I assume that you've probably been talking to a lot of people. Trump would be a very popular topic of conversation. And what are people saying?
So folks are, and I apologize, my cat just jumped on the table, but
Like
um,
that. That's okay.
yes. So people are just they're flabbergasted. I guess that's the word to use. They don't understand how this has just gotten so bad so quickly. And so I have a lot of friends who are in the activist community who have been out marching and so on. I have friends who are in the financial industry who are very frustrated with the uncertainty. And, my husband works in the tech sector, and they're all very frustrated with the tariffs because they're impacting their ability to function in terms of, designing chips and things like that that are, use, uh, parts that are coming from China.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's chaos, political chaos across wide swaths of the United States. Um, so that the animosity between Trudeau and Trump, and then the warm fuzzies with Carney, that's one story. The other story is that Trump was asked if he still wants, if he thinks that Canada should be the 51st state. And he said, well, yeah, I still think that that's the best thing, but yeah, it's kind of a non-starter. What? You know, Canadians have been lighting their hair on fire for 3 months now over this very issue. It's united us in a way that we never have. And then just with one offhand comment, Trump takes it off the table, maybe. What are we to make of that?
Well, it's the same thing with even the tariffs, right? He goes and goes and goes, and oh, it's a 90-day hold, and then it's also this situation where he's maybe trying to be a little bit nicer to Carney. I mean, he complimented him on winning the election, etc. So I suspect he's not giving up on that. That's his, it's one of his thing. But the I think I've always said it's not feasible. It's something that just can't happen. Canada's a sovereign state. Trump said never say never. So Carney said never, 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 and that's the way to deal with Donald Trump, right? You just say, don't back down. Don't, if he's a bully. If he's going to say, oh, yeah, I still think Canada should be the 51st state. Sorry, never. We're a sovereign country, and that's it. That's that. And I think Carney handled it very well.
I'm reluctant to bring this up because as a journalist, we should only talk about things that have been verified. But this is a story that's been making the rounds on social media, so we'll just qualify it as saying it's unverified. But if it's true, it makes so much sense, which is that once Trump started his threats, Carney, when he became prime minister in March, went over to Europe and he got Japan and he got other European countries that were bondholders, held up like hundreds of billions of dollars of US bonds, and said, got them organized, went back to Trump and said, okay, if you continue with this nonsense, we're going to dump our bonds and tank your dollar and cause you a world of hurt. And the reason it makes so much sense is everybody agrees Trump respects strength, not weakness. And that would have been one of the ultimate power plays that Carney could have pulled off. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I've been hearing that story as well, and I think there's some credibility to it because it was interesting how that happened that, you know, Trump was pushing, 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 then all of a sudden he pulled back. But, the other part of the story I've heard, which again has not been verified, is that basically it ties into that story that basically treasury bonds were going to tank because they were going to get dumped if Trump didn't pull back. And that a couple of his advisors went in when Pete Navarro wasn't there and said, you got to pull back on the tariffs or people are going to dump bonds and we're going to be in a depression, basically. And so that's the other part of the story I have heard is that it wasn't just that there was the threat, is that some of his advisors actually went into his office while Pete Navarro, who's the tariff guy, was not there and said, you got to stop this.
Okay, so whether or not these are true, I think that there is a sense here that Carney has the strength and is perceived by Trump as having the strength to stand up to him. He's a worthy adversary in
Mm-hmm.
negotiations. And so the whole tone of this relationship between the two countries has taken a turn for the better, I guess, today. Um, based on but based on what's come before, as a political scientist, how would you, if you had the opportunity, how would you advise Carney to handle things going forward?
So my advice, which I'm happy to pass on to Prime Minister Carney, is to stay tough. That is what Trump respects, and I think he did a great job today of standing up to Trump, and that is what needs to continue. And the reality is, as we've seen across the U.S., when you yield to Trump, he just asks for more. So the best thing you can do in the face of Trump's bullying is to stand up to him and, do what you think is right for your country. And basically say, no, we're not going to cave in, because as soon as you cave in, he sees weakness and he's just going to go in and ask for more.
That leads me to another question, and I don't know that you have an informed opinion on this, but I'll ask the question, you can tell me. And that is Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, kind of became the face of appeasement to Trump. And she went down there and she pled her case and she argued for concessions and she made concessions as many as she could in Alberta, very visible ones, and kind of the opposite of the approach that Carney is taking. And would you say, looking at the two approaches, appeasement versus strength, that maybe Smith misplayed her hand?
I can't, say, I'm semi-informed on this. I would say that it's, it will have to, we'll have to see how it plays out, right? The energy sector is an important one on both sides of the border, and she is playing the hand that she has. And as I look at it, I think it's more important to stay tough. I think she does think she's being tough, in her own way, but to her own government, not to Trump, right? So, well, I don't know how that's going to play out. I will speculate that she has a difficult hand to play, given that she's just the premier of Alberta versus Carney, who is over the entire country, and Trump, who is over an entire country. So I don't think it's and you can compare it to what Doug Ford has been doing. um it's hard to say. We have to see how it plays out. I just think it's a hard hand to play when you're in a country where everybody else is has a different approach.
Yeah, yeah, I've been around the block a few times over the years and seen a few governments and a few prime ministers. I don't ever remember anything this complex and this fluid and this as difficult to get our arms around it and understand it. I mean, there's an element of irrationality here that just
Yes.
makes the whole thing unpredictable and just exceedingly difficult. But Terry, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights, and we'll because this is not going away. I am sure we'll come back and talk to you again.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Thanks for being here.